So what's next for the U.S.-China trade negotiations? Joining us live from London to explore this issue is Torrens. As senior partner at Control Risks, he advises Chinese businesses across Europe and Africa and helps support Western investment into Greater China region. Chris, welcome to the show. China's statement, as you have heard, leaves a lot of room for interpretation. On one hand, it says specific progress were made regarding agriculture and energy purchases from the U.S., but on the other hand, it says it's yet to be finalized by both sides. How shall we read into this?
Well, I think there are different agendas on both sides, and we have to bear in mind that President Trump's decisions have flip-flopped quite a bit over the last few weeks. So we've still got 12 days before any final tariffs are finalized. June 15th, I think, is the date. And as was mentioned earlier by your correspondent, there are a number of other issues at play here. So I think there's still a lot to play for. Not much came out of the weekend, but I think we'll see more talks before the 15th.
So the U.S. side, after this round of talks in Beijing, has been pretty quiet. What does the U.S. want to get out of this round of talks, and have they got what they wanted?
Well, not so far, no. I think what Mr. Trump is doing is trying to demonstrate that he can still play tough on China. And you have to remember what his agenda is. He's looking at midterm elections in November. He's obviously looking for distraction from his personal affairs at home. And so this isn't too bad a subject to be pushing out there. He's demonstrating that he's a tough politician. He's trying to show that he's a businessman leader. So I think he's probably getting almost what he wants at the moment. But ultimately, as was mentioned earlier, it's about talks with North Korea. It's about continuing to look tough to the U.S. electorate.
Well, you mentioned June 15th deadline. That is a self-imposed deadline from Washington on China. But let's face it, June 12th is the date that Trump is supposed to meet with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Don't you think that he wanted to get this China issue out of the hand because he has a lot on his plates?
He does, you're right. And I think he sees a deal with North Korea as politically something which would give him huge support at home and demonstrate to U.S. voters that he really can create change at an international level, because obviously that has not been done before. So I think that is probably a priority for him. And the way Mr. Trump works with politics, he can, as you said, he can push back this informal deadline probably through to the end of June. I mean, they'll be looking at restrictions on industries, technology industries, finalizing those, I think, by the 30th of June. So in Mr. Trump's eyes, he probably feels he's got quite a bit of time to play with still.
Well, President Trump said he's thinking about the border with North Korea, the DPRK Chinese border, when he talks about trade with China. What card is Trump playing right now?
Well, I think that China has always preferred to have a buffer state in the form of North Korea than to have South Korea, which has, remember, upwards of 30,000 U.S. troops stationed there, to have U.S. troops potentially patrolling the Chinese border. That's not something that Beijing would particularly like. So I think he's playing that card to an extent and trying to show that he too, and the U.S., can negotiate directly with North Korea rather than leaving it, as has happened historically, to Beijing. So he's certainly playing a game here in classic sort of businessman style. And he's going to look to try and make sure that North Korea-US summit happens on June the 12th in Singapore. And that's his absolute priority at the moment.
Finally, how optimistic are you about the US-China deal, and what would it look like?
I think that I am still broadly optimistic, because I think obviously China's very keen to maintain a strong trading relationship, but the reality is both sides need each other. The US needs China hugely as well. We've seen US companies which source goods in China desperately lobbying Washington to remind them that if there are tough tariffs put in place, then US companies will suffer as well. Mr. Trump just needs something to show that he's a tough leader so that he can lead into the midterm elections in November. So I'm confident there will be some kind of deal. It's just difficult to say exactly how that's going to look with still 2 or 3 weeks to go.
We'll see how things play out. Torrens from London, thanks so much.